everybody, and welcome to our show, Beyond Your Screen. I'm Elizabeth.
And I'm Blogsy. And here on our channel, we intend to dive headfirst into some of the world's most interesting tales.
We're going to be discussing a wide variety of topics, from murder mysteries to origin stories, urban legends, and much, much more.
So drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and join us as we explore the mysteries and scandals that happened beyond your screen.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, Blogsy Walker here. We're out here in front of the Milton Bakery donut mural. And why, you may ask? Who loves donuts more than that of Homer Simpson? That's right. Today, we're taking a special look into the Simpsons world. And not just anything, the Treehouses of Horror.
That's right. We've sat down and watched every Treehouse of Horror, even the Thanksgiving one.
So sit tight and stay for the whole video as we explore our least and our most favorite Halloween Simpsons segments.
So like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment as we take a journey
Beyond your screen.
So we're going to start with number 95, Loutbreak, in season 35.
When Homer is told by Smithers that he can't eat donuts in the reactor core, he says that the place is turning into a nanny state. Then he proceeds to drop his donut and it rolls through some radioactive waste. Not being one to waste a donut, Homer eats it anyway, and it begins to alter his DNA. When he wakes up the next morning, he goes to steal Ned Flanders' newspaper and burps in Ned's face. This turns Ned into a Homer-like creature that when he burps, infects other people.
This episode is just, it's redundant. We've already seen multiple segments and episodes where they have done a multiple different kind of Homer setup. It's just same thing redone, except less funny and more crass, in my opinion. And if it's not smart, it's not original. I keep saying it's not funny because just season 35, they're just not funny anymore. They're just recycling over and over and over again. That's all I have to say. It's just a genuinely disappointing skit.
I felt similarly to her opinion, feeling that the plot was overdone and that the jokes were very forced, and that it was a very crude way to get to a plot that we have already seen so many times before.
And then at 96, we have Heaven Swipes Right in season 31.
An episode in which Homer unnecessarily dies during a baseball game, I believe, and having been told that it's not his time to die yet, and that he can have somebody else's body whose time has come. This episode just sees Homer jumping from body to body, ruining all of it. I do not know much about this segment because I refused to watch more than about 3 minutes into it, but from what I do remember, I do know that the segment is very forced and very bad.
Yeah. Forced seems to be the theme of everything past season 25.
Multiplicity. An episode that sees Lisa go insane after Bart alters the results of her tests, causing Miss Hoover to give her an F. The resounding F then causes Lisa to go mad, forming multiple personalities that all want to kill Bart and his friends.
So, I just don't really like any episode really that features Lisa heavily. This is by far not one of her worst episodes in general, but it wasn't even, we have it marked as a spooky / thriller, but that's because it's not scary. The concept was a good one. They just did not deliver it properly, in my opinion. There was one part that didn't make a lot of sense where she was poorly playing the bagpipes, and I guess she was doing a Groundskeeper Willie impression. It just wasn't working. and it didn't flow.
This episode went down about as well as the Hindenburg. It was clunky, forced, and in my opinion, just a terrible segment altogether. None of the jokes flow naturally at all, and the plot is, while the plot in as of itself is a good idea on paper, it was not very well delivered.
Exactly. And then under that one, we've got B9 Rewind in season 32.
This episode sees Lisa and Nelson repetitively killed whenever they go to her 9th birthday. And in order to break the cycle, they have to kill Gil at midnight, which seems sort of an odd premise. The episode was clunky, confusing, and it was not very well delivered. Next we come to Nightmare on Elm Tree, an episode that sees Homer get fed up with the boys' antics in the treehouse and attempt to cut the tree down altogether. The tree then gains life and attempts to go about giving other trees life and kill the humans that chop them down and harvest them for things such as firewood and Christmases. It ends on a Christmassy note, which again doesn't fit the narrative of a Halloween theme. It's improperly timed and it's exceedingly forced. The funniest joke in the whole thing is when the thing from what's the name of that Rick Moranis movie?
The plant monster.
Yes.
It's got a girl's name. It's named after his girlfriend.
Little Shop of Horrors.
The Little Shop of Horrors.
When the plant from Little Shop of Horrors says, "I'm a tree too," and they say, "No, you're not," and he says, "I identify as one. I'm a transplant." That is the funniest and most well-delivered line of the entire sketch. And as a result, it winds up firmly near the bottom of our list. Next, we come to the segment titled Starship Poopers.
In season 10, that one's just horrible.
A segment in which they find out that Marge was impregnated by Kang and Kodos and that the child is not really Homer's. Kang and Kodos fight for custody of the child, and ultimately it is to be settled on an episode of Jerry Springer. Poorly delivered and very forced.
Which is odd, especially for the earlier seasons. Season 10 is still I think is still a very good season in general, but that particular Halloween of Horror segment just could not be more dumb. Married to the Blob, season 18.
An episode in which Homer eats a space goop, which turns him into a giant gelatinous blob that just goes around consuming as much as humanly possible.
And Dr. Phil shows up.
Dr. Phil is in the segment, telling Homer that he can't just eat away all his problems.
And then we've got, in season 23, the Diving Bell and the Butterball, which I could, before you tell them what it's about, I just could not, sitting in a boardroom, coming up with the concept of this segment, I cannot believe a bunch of highly paid people with college educations and thought that this particular segment was a great idea.
The Diving Bell and the Butterball, an episode in which Homer, while putting up Halloween decorations, accidentally grabs a very real spider, which bites him on the neck and paralyzes him. Once paralyzed, fed up with Lisa talking to him repetitively, he decides that a way to get her to stop is by farting. And then he decides that this is also a way of communication. So then he proceeds to communicate through farting. Then, while he's sitting still, another spider comes up and bites him, which gives him superpowers. So he becomes a paraplegic that is also Spider-Man.
We have season 20's the robot one after
Untitled
the
Robot Parody.
Yeah.
Which sees Bart walk into a charity shop to get a very cheap present for Lisa. Upon walking in, he sees a small Transformer that it looks very much so like Optimus Prime from the Transformer series. But since it's not a girl toy, he can't buy it for Lisa, so it then transforms into a Malibu Stacy convertible. When it does this, he does indeed decide to buy it. When it infiltrates the confines of their house, it turns all the other toys into Transformers as well, and then eventually an uprising occurs. At the very end, Marge says, why can't you just settle this amongst yourselves? The two warring robots decide that they can band together to enslave humanity. A segment that is completely takes place during Christmas, thus falling under the category for us under not Halloween related and not very good. To our next segment entitled The Fright to Creep and Scare Harms, an episode in which Lisa comes across the tombstone of William H. Bonney, which has the caption below on it, "I dream of a world without guns." So Lisa leads a campaign to get rid of everyone's guns in honor of William H. Bonney, who was gunned down in his youth. Upon getting rid of all of the guns, William H. Bonney comes out of the grave to reveal that he's really Billy the Kid, and now the entire town is defenseless because the only guns left are in his cold dead hands, as he puts it. He has a gang, they all have guns, and they essentially own the town because the town is defenseless without their firearms.
It's just Lisa, once again, running her mouth and ruining it for everybody, which leads us into our very, very last, unanimously in our entire household, worst segment ever put out by The Simpsons, The Night of the Dolphin.
The Night of the Dolphin sees Lisa and her family go to SeaWorld, which she sees the cruel and unfair treatment of the dolphin within, named Snorky. She then decides that since the dolphin is being treated cruelly and unfairly, she's going to release him back into the wild. So when she does, he reunites with his dolphin brothers and decides to force man off land. Because apparently, as they say in the episode, man originally pushed dolphins off land, and dolphins originally were the inhabitants of land. So at the very end of the episode, everyone is left floating in the ocean, and the dolphins have taken back over the land.
It's just... I don't have words to put into place. I don't think there are any words to describe how much I just don't like this segment. So we're just going to move on to our next category.
I, however, do have a many few words for how I feel about this episode, but they're not suitable for a Christian show. So we shall move on.
And we're going to count down from 10. I believe ours are slightly different, so we're going to go back and forth and ranking them and saying why we think that's where they should be in our opinion. So for my number 10, I have season 34's Death Tome.
An episode in which Lisa says that the planet is in dire danger, and then a death tome drops from the sky, and she murders several people by writing their names in it. But you can only kill them in one specific way, one time.
So, I don't really 100% know why I like this one. It's not particularly funny, even though it is scary. And I like the animation. I think it's very different without it being weird, like the 3D, when they do the 3D CGI animations. I've never really liked those for any skits.
I, however, have one that, though late on in the series, is not nearly as late as hers. It's The Great Pumpkin Millhouse.
That is a good one.
This one, instead of the modern animation technique that she is bragging about, is a more retro animation technique, going back to the theme of It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, being a spoof and reference to this great classic. I love it because of its retro animation style, the great reference, and just how funny it is all around for being such a late episode, how the jokes don't necessarily feel forced.
I like in that episode when Marge is constantly, is it the trombone? Where she's going, wah, 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 with the trombone. Especially, she's like, if you don't like this episode, you can write to wah, 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 wah. And I think that's just funny. But in my number 9, I have Hungry Are the Damned in season 2.
An episode in which aliens come down and abduct the Simpsons family. Earlier in the seasons, back when the Treehouses of Horror were newer. They board the ship and discover that Kang and Kodos, in their first appearance, are attempting to eat the Simpsons. They later find out that this was not their intentions, and Kang and Kodos exile them back to their home planet.
So I like this episode because if you've been watching and paying attention to this episode, you'll find out I am not the biggest fan of Lisa. And she runs her mouth, she gets all up in everybody's business, and then it ends up blowing up in her face.
Indeed. I agreed on this one, however I disagree with Elizabeth's take on the episode. I find the way that Kang and Kodos act exceedingly suspicious, and given the circumstances that Lisa found a book that said how to cook humans, I don't find what she did odd or unjustified in any way.
And then my number 8, I have season 7, Nightmare on Evergreen Terrace.
An episode that is reminiscent of the movie Nightmare on Elm Street. Groundskeeper Willie is burned in a horrible fire and comes back to haunt the children in their dreams.
I think this one is a very, very unique take on the Nightmare on Elm Street.
Indeed. I as well agreed on this point.
Is that all you got to say?
Indeed.
Okay. Well, for number 7, I have Dracula from season 5.
Essentially, the title is what it is. Mr. Burns is Dracula and sucks the blood out of Bart, and Bart attempts to suck the blood out of Lisa.
I like the super fun happy slide. Is just a very cute thing that they put in there because it basically is Bart's downfall in that episode. What turns him into a vampire is because he can't resist going down the super fun happy slide.
I, however, went for Terror at 5.5 feet. Is the episode where Bill Shatner sees a gremlin on the wing and is heard to remark, "There's something on the wing."
So I also have Terror at 5.5 feet, but I have that at number 6. I think it's a little better than Dracula and all these others that I've noticed. So what do you have at number 6?
Nightmare Cafeteria, an episode in which they find out that the detention room is dangerously overcrowded, and during which Principal Skinner accidentally spills meat tenderizer on Jimbo and finds out that kids are delicious. He then proceeds to kill all the children in detention, grind them up, and serve them as lunch in the Nightmare Cafeteria.
I have Nightmare Cafeteria. This is season 6, by the way. I have that one at number 5. Like I was saying, our lists are very similar. But I think Nightmare Cafeteria is probably one of the scariest ones they've ever done. It is by far one of the most suspenseful, in my opinion. And I think it balances comedy, goriness, and suspense very, very well. And that's why it is ranked in my top 5.
I, on the other hand, at number 5, have The Devil and Homer Simpson, an episode in which Homer, finding out that there are no donuts left in the box, sells his soul to the devil, Ned Flanders, for a donut. He then, after the agreement, realizes that if he doesn't finish the donut, the devil doesn't get his soul. But being the gluttonous individual that Homer is, he finishes the donut later that night and ends up going to hell for the night. The next morning, or the next evening, a trial is arranged, and Homer gets off scot-free. Again.
Now, I've always wondered why in that episode they never just threw the donut away. Is that part of the contract?
Because that would be finishing the donut.
Would it? So they have to keep it forever? Is that
Yes,
what you're saying? So they
that's
can't
exactly
give it.
what you have to do.
If they gave it to the dog, would the dog go
Because
to
that's
hell?
you intentionally finishing the donut.
I guess I never thought
You
about
said
it
that the
way.
moment that you finish the donut, the devil owns your soul.
So they should have put
So
it in
if
the
you
safe.
intentionally finish that donut, you go to hell.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to it because that's also on my list, but it's higher up. I have at my number 4. I have the Shinning.
The Shinning, an episode that is exactly as it sounds, a parody of The Shining, in which no beer and no TV make Homer go crazy. Mr. Burns, in an effort to get a good winter's work out of Homer, decides that he's going to cut off the beer supply and the television supply to the cabin as well, which causes Homer to go insane and attempt to murder his family.
But it is a very good retelling of The Shining, except it's obviously far funnier than the real Shining. What's your number 4?
My number 4 is Bad Dream House, an episode in which the Simpsons buy a house which is built on an ancient Indian burial ground, something that Homer did not find out from the real estate agent beforehand. The house is cursed and has several dimensions and makes Homer float to the ceiling and drop to the floor, and makes the Simpsons attempt to murder each other.
Until Marge loses her temper.
Indeed. Eventually, the house collapses into the dimension and kills itself.
And then, at my number 3, we go back, The Devil and Homer Simpson. And then, what's your number 3?
At my number 3, I have Dracula, as I said before. Parody of so many classics. A great episode altogether.
I think putting that at number 3 is valid, but I'm going to stick with mine. And then at my number 2, I have Bad Dream House, which...
As previously mentioned. But number 2 is The Shining, as previously mentioned as well.
And then number 1, the very best segment...
Unanimously voted on.
By so many people, The Raven. The very first episode, the very first Treehouse of Horror.
A comedic take on Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, featuring James Earl Jones as the narrator and Homer as the man in the story.
Mm-hmm.
The Simpsons bring this great classic to life in a comedic fashion.
So, number 5, season 27. This is Wanted, Dead Than Alive, Homerzilla, and Telepaths of Glory. You tell them what those were? Wanted, Dead Than Alive is, it's the one where Sideshow Bob
repetitively kills Bart.
And then reanimates him, and then...
kills him again.
Then reanimates him, and...
kills him again.
It's unnecessarily gory. It's not funny. There's no amusement to anything that he's doing. It's just blood and guts and gore. At one point, he takes Bart's large intestine and...
plays jump rope.
And then he strings him up and uses them as a backpack harnesses. And it's gory and it's not tacky. And Alfred Hitchcock would be appalled.
Indubitably.
Then Homerzilla. Again, with the taking the Homer and
Parody.
making him into different things.
Parody of Godzilla as told by, I believe, Grandpa Simpson,
I think
I
so
may be
as well.
thinking, or King Homer was told by Grandpa,
That one is all... It's basically the same thing.
essentially.
It is essentially just Homer put into the body of a giant monster. He's dopey, he's brash, he's breaking everything, and it's basically just Homer as a giant lizard.
And then Telepaths of Glory, which is an episode in which the kids go down into a cave, get covered in toxic sludge, and then gain telepathic powers based on their intelligent merit, which leaves Bart powerless, but the other two with powers, Milhouse and Lisa.
Not Halloween. At least the other two were spooky in this episode. Wanted, Dead Than Alive, and Homerzilla. I know Godzilla, when it came out, was one of the most scary things that came out for its time when it originally came out. But Telepaths of Glory, not scary, not spooky,
Not funny.
not thrilly, not funny. That's an understatement. Not funny is an understatement.
I, however, went for Treehouse of Horror 27, Season 28, Episode 4. Dry Hard, a parody of the Hunger Games, which not only wasn't funny, wasn't Halloween related in any way.
It wasn't even a good parody of the Hunger Games.
BFF RIP, one that, even though it was a spooky thriller and was mediocre for a spooky thriller, wasn't too terribly Halloween related and wasn't great for me as far as the humor was concerned.
Also, Lisa heavy.
And Mo Finger, an episode in which Mo is essentially James Bond, and it is a massive James Bond parody. While I do find it to be a good parody, I do not find it in any way to be Halloween related. and therefore it makes the list as well.
Alrighty, at my number 4, we have Season 18, Treehouse of Horror 7. Married to the Blob, You Gotta Know When to Gollum, and The Day the Earth Looked Stupid. We've already covered Married to the Blob in one of the top 10 worst episodes or segments that has ever been. Dr. Phil telling Homer he can't eat his feelings and eating the radioactive donut and all that. We've already discussed just how poor that particular segment is.
And then You Gotta Know When to Gollum. Whereas I believe it was Richard Lewis that was in it.
It's not funny. It's so unbelievably neurotic and nitpicky, and
It was indeed Richard Lewis. And while I am a big fan of Richard Lewis, I am not a big fan of this episode. Especially the wife that they make for the Gollum, which is just so unbelievably obnoxious, it makes me want to hurt myself.
Then you've got The Day the Earth Looked Stupid,
Which is essentially showing the results of what happened when Orson Welles read War of the Worlds on the radio.
and I don't really hate that segment. I do think that it got a bum rap being paired with these two other segments. It would definitely be ranked higher up in episodes if it got paired with a different two. But overall, it's just, as a whole, this episode isn't fun, and The Day the Earth Looked Stupid, though an interesting concept, not enough to save the episode.
I, however, went for season 29, episodes 4's Treehouse of Horror 30. Danger Things, Heaven Swipes Right, and When Harry Met Slimy. Danger Things is essentially a parody of Stranger Things, and while I have not seen the TV show, I am not even remotely amused by the parody of the show. Heaven Swipes Right, and then When Harry Met Slimy. A very, very, very disturbing episode that is about Kang or Kodos
not sure.
falling in love with Patty or Selma. In the end, Kang and Kodos fall in love with Patty and Selma. But it's just a very, very disturbing episode with a very disturbing premise.
Number 3, I have season 23, Treehouse of Horror 22, The Diving Bells and the Butterball, Dial D for Diddley, and the Navvy. The Diving Bells and the Butterball, we've discussed this one before. It's such lowbrow humor. Yes, it's a Avatar.
It's the Avatar parody.
Yeah.
Yes, the Diving Bell and the Butterball, once again, is the parody that's kind of Spider-Man, but kind of isn't, but kind of is.
And it's just the entire, anything that is remotely humorous about it is passing gas, and it's for about -3 seconds.
Indeed. Dial D for Diddley, however, is one where Homer tricks Ned into murdering people for him by making
pretending
Ned
to be God.
think that he is God.
Yeah. It's just blasphemous. And just Ned murdering people, I think it just is a betrayal of the character, even for a Treehouse of Horror. It's just such a... Thinking that Ned is so unbelievably naive that he would believe some random radio voice that's piping through his house.
In the Navy is a parody of Avatar, and it is, needless to say, mediocre at best.
Your number 3?
My number 3 would be Season 33, Episode 3, Treehouse of Horror 32. Bong Joon-ho's This Side of Paradise, Nightmare on Elm Tree, and Dead Ringer. Dead Ringer is one where the kids watch a cursed TikTok that gives them 7 days to live, and Lisa manages to thwart this.
By making friends with the demon. Am I correct?
Yes, and eventually the demon, like anyone would, kills itself again when she realizes that she has to be Lisa's friend.
Yes.
Then there is Nightmare on Elm Tree. We've outlined this one before. It made our top 10 worst segments list. It is the one in which Homer goes down to chop down the tree in the backyard, and then it comes alive and kills all the townsfolk, and ultimately the segment ends at Christmas with all the trees having stacked bodies in the town square in the shape of a Christmas tree. And it's just all around a very, very, very
Bizarre.
bad segment.
It's odd and just not.
And then Bong Joon-ho's This Side of Parasite.
I kind of like that one.
I don't know what this is a parody of, but I don't like it.
I don't think it's a bad concept personally.
It's very odd, and it's very forced, and I, for some unknown reason, just find it tacky.
That's how I feel about the diving bell and the butterball.
Indeed.
There's just so many other things you could do. That was just very disappointing.
Indeed.
For my number 2, I have season 35, which is the newest Treehouse of Horror. It is Wild Bart's Can't Be Token, 8, and Loutbreak.
An episode in Wild Bart's Can't Be Token is the segment in which they say that they digitalize all of Springfield's art. And so Bart, thinking it's amusing to pull down his pants and digitalize himself, does so, not realizing that he's actually going to be uploaded into the cyber world. And being as such, he's exceedingly valuable since he's the first ever digitized human being, and Homer considers selling him, but not before Marge can get him out.
Then we've got 8, which is actually not so bad, but like I said with The Day the Earth Looks Stupid, it just ended up being paired with 2 very, very dumb segments.
8 is a parody of 7, in which Lisa kills several of her former friends, and ultimately finds out that the serial killer that's been killing all these people is herself. And she's then locked up with Sideshow Bob, who she kills for murdering Bart as a child.
And then Loudbreak.
My number 2 is season 29, episode 4, Treehouse of Horror 28. Exorcists, Cora Lisa, and Homer. Homer is a segment in which Homer is left alone for days at the house. Upon discovering that he's eaten all the food while the family is away, he goes to put a hot dog onto the grill. In putting the hot dog on the grill, he goes to slice it open, and when he does, he accidentally cuts off his finger, but then decides to eat it. Then he realizes that he likes the way he tastes, and he continuously chops off more and more of himself to eat, instead of buying food. This was found to be a very tacky segment and a very gross segment by most, to quote those whom I asked. Nobody in particular really likes this segment. Cora Lisa is a parody of Coraline. I'm not quite sure if it's stop motion, but it's done in that sort of fashion. But that movie, which I actually like, and I enjoy the segment very much. It's actually got some pretty good humor, but it's just one of those unfortunate circumstances in which it's paired with 2 very bad ones, and just couldn't raise those 2 up to the standard.
Coraline 2 is actually stop motion.
Yes, okay. And then Exorcist, one in which Maggie gets a Pazuzu, which is apparently a cursed item, and then proceeds to kill a bunch of people. And then there's a tacky joke about Catholic priests and children. So
My number 1 is Ghost Dead, Scary Tales Can Come True, and Night of the Dolphin, which is season 12, Treehouse of Horror 11.
Ghost Dead, an episode in which Homer is told by his horoscope that he's going to die that night. And so he goes about his day, having done a lot of perilous things, and then dies at the hands of Broccoli. He's told by St. Peter when he gets to the pearly gates that he doesn't have a single good deed by his name, and in order to get to heaven, he has to do at least one, and sends him back down for 24 hours to see if he can complete one. Scary Tales Can Come True is actually found by me to be a pretty good segment. It is a parody of essentially all of the fairy tales that we were told growing up, Hansel and Gretel mostly being the predominant theme in this one. Night of the Dolphin, as previously mentioned, as the worst Halloween segment ever, in which Lisa releases a dolphin back into the wild where he reunites with his dolphin brothers as their leader and forces people off of land to claim it, or to reclaim it, as they say, as their own. And then my number one, Season 35, Episode 5. The latest of the Treehouses of Horror. We've already outlined how bad this one is and what all the segments are, so I shan't go into further detail.
Alrighty, this is our second to last segment of this episode, and it is our top 5 favorite episodes as a whole. And we're going to start off with my number 5, Season 34, Treehouse of Horror, number 34, which is The Pookadook, Death Tome, and Simpsons World.
Simpsons World, an episode in which Homer discovers that he's an animatronic in a theme park. Death Tome, a segment in which Lisa has a death tome fall from the sky, and she can kill people using it by writing their names in it, but she can only kill them once in one specific manner. And The Pookadook, a parody of the movie The Babadook, in which Marge releases a demon by reading from a book called The Pookadook.
I think even though this is in the later seasons, and I say repeatedly that the later seasons are not funny, they're not witty, and they're not amusing, this one is the exception that proves the rule. It shows that they still have the talent and that they can still do it, and that they're defaulting to this lowbrow humor that they have been doing. They don't have to do. And then the Death Tome, I've already said why I like that segment so much. And then the Pookadook, I think it is a very good retelling of the Babadook.
I, however, went for Season 13, Episode 1, Treehouse of Horror 12, which includes such segments as Hex in the City, one where Homer gets cursed by a gypsy and must find a leprechaun to solve his problems. House of Wax, an episode featuring Pierce Brosnan, one of the worst James Bonds ever, as the voice of a robotic house that is so in love with Marge it's going to kill Homer in an effort to be able to marry her. And Whiz Kid, a segment that we will hear about later on, but it is essentially a parody of Harry Potter, except Bart betrays Lisa to Lord Montemort, sucker of essence.
So, as my number 4, I've got Season 6, Treehouse of Horror 5, which is The Shining.
Shinning. You want to get sued?
Sorry, The Shinning. Time and Punishment, and Nightmare Cafeteria.
The Shinning, as previously mentioned, is a parody of The Shining, in which no TV and no beer make Homer go crazy. Time and Punishment, a segment in which Homer invents a time machine by attempting to fix his broken toaster that he constantly gets his hands stuck in. And Nightmare Cafeteria, as previously mentioned, one where Seymour Skinner goes evil and eats the students. My number 4, however, is Treehouse of Horror 7, which includes such segments as The Thing and I, a segment in which Bart realizes that he has an evil twin that's been chained up in the attic. The Genesis Tub, one in which Elisa accidentally creates a small society by attempting to ruin yet another thing for people. And Citizen Kang, one in which Kang and Kodos replace Bill Clinton and the lesser known these days Bob Dole, and attempt to run for president, despite the fact that they're illegal aliens.
Now, for my number 3, I've got Season 7, Treehouse of Horror 6, Attack of the 50-Foot Eyesores, Nightmare on Evergreen Terrace, and Homer Cubed.
Attack of the 50-Foot Eyesores is one in which Homer encourages the advertising mascots to become alive by ticking off Lard Lad, who then in turn gets hit by lightning and comes back to get his donut back from Homer, who stole it. And so do all of the other advertising mascots come alive. Nightmare on Evergreen Terrace, a segment in which groundskeeper Willie, as previously mentioned, was set on fire and killed inside the school, and is coming back to haunt children where their parents cannot protect them. And Homer Cubed, one of the worst segments ever made that nobody likes. Homer, in a not-so-spot-on parody of The Twilight Zone, goes behind his bookcase to find a different dimension and gets lost in it, ultimately supposedly dying, but then ending up in this universe that we are in. My number 3, however, is her number 4, and it is Treehouse of Horror 5, Shinnin, Time and Punishment, and Nightmare Cafeteria. Need we say more about these excellent segments?
And then, my number 2 is Season 5, Treehouse of Horror 4, The Devil and Homer Simpson, Terror at 5.5 Feet, and Dracula. We've already gone over these. They're awesome. You can't get much better than these. We've got one more that is better, but not by much. It was a tight race for these two, honestly, in my opinion. But The Devil and Homer Simpson, I still say that if he puts it in a safe, in a Ziploc bag in the ocean, he'll be fine. Terror at 5.5 Feet is a very, very good interpretation of the Twilight Zone episode. And Dracula, just all around spooky. Very, very good of Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Indeed. And then, my second, Treehouse of Horror 2, where each of the three of them have nightmares. Lisa's nightmare being that there is a monkey's paw that Homer buys in Marrakesh, and it grants them as many wishes as the monkey had fingers, and all of them go horribly awry, until Flanders gets a hold of it and makes everything great. Bart's Nightmare, a Twilight Zone parody, which none of us find to be particularly great, in which he plays the boy from the original Twilight Zone who can read people's minds and horribly distort reality. And then Homer's Nightmare, where Homer has his brain stolen by Mr. Burns, put into a robot, and then, when Mr. Burns goes to put Homer's brain back, Mr. Burns is crushed horribly by the robot, and his head is sutured onto Homer's neck.
Yeah, I think that episode is just this side of being on my worst episodes list. Yeah, I don't like it. You like it, and I'm glad you do, but I think I could live without that episode.
This next episode, however, could not go without being both of our number 1, as unanimously decided upon, both within this small circle here and within my household, and online as well. Nothing beats the original Treehouse of Horror, the one that started it all for us, with such classics as Bad Dream House, Hungry Are the Damned, and The Raven. Bad Dream House, the segment, as previously mentioned, in which Homer buys a cursed house built on an Indian burial ground. Hungry Are the Damned, an episode in which we find out that the real monsters are the Simpsons themselves. And The Raven.
The Raven is just a retelling of Edgar Allan Poe, and it is just a classic. I love it so much. It's my favorite out of those 3 segments. I think if I had to rank them, it would probably be backwards. No, I think it would be The Raven, Bad Dream House, and then Hungry Are the Damned is probably my least favorite one of that. But this episode is the best Treehouse of Horror. If you're going to start someone out on Treehouses of Horror, you got to start at the beginning just because it's the best.
Indeed. And if they don't like the segment that is The Raven, just look inside their brain and you will see darkness there and nothing more. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I went online and decided to take to a Facebook fan group for The Simpsons and ask the question, what are the best segments and what are the worst segments? These are the results by popular vote.
So the top 3 worst segments by popular vote were Frank's Father,
Frankenstein, the one in which Frank's father comes back from the dead after being reanimated by his son, and then goes on a binge for people's body parts in order to create the perfect body.
I'm afraid I have to agree with that one. It's not a good segment, in my opinion. Then we've got WizKid, the Harry Potter parody.
The Harry Potter parody,
Yeah.
which the vast majority of the people who voted and commented said they thought it was lazy writing, and some even said that it turned them off of Treehouses of Horror entirely, much to my surprise.
I could not believe when he told me that one, because I think that the WizKid is absolutely one of the best. It's one of the best segments, in my opinion. But then, universally, number one, Homer eating himself.
The segment titled Homer, which was so bad that not only did it get an almost unanimous vote by the people voting on that one, but it got a comment under my post of which was the best one, when somebody stated, "I pretty much like all of them, they're all great, except for that one where Homer eats himself." And now on to the best segments as voted by you the people. At number 3 is The Raven. Surprisingly enough, getting a good amount of votes, but not being able to quite break the deadlock with our number 2 choice, Nightmare on Evergreen Terrace. The one where Willie comes back in a Freddy Krueger-esque fashion to kill the children of the school. And then number 1, as unanimously voted, The Shinnin'. The episode in which Homer has his beer supply cut off, as well as his television supply, while being the winter caretaker of Mr. Burns' mansion, in which he goes crazy and attempts to kill everyone. The only person he's able to get, however, is groundskeeper Willie. He dies later in the snow whilst watching TV with his family.
I agree with all 3 of those. Those are awesome episodes. They're awesome segments. I don't think I'll ever understand why you guys don't like the WizKid. I think the Harry Potter one is not lazy writing. It didn't even really stick to the Harry Potter. It stuck to the basic premise, but it didn't really copy that much, considering things like The Shinning is almost a scene for scene recreation.
Indeed. So, like, share, subscribe. Make sure to get your thoughts in down below. And join us next time as we take the journey
Beyond your screen.
Looks like those kids found the true spirit of Halloween, or Thanksgiving, or whatever. And for those of you who feel like we've trampled on a beloved children's classic, I encourage you to write to the following address. Happy Holidays, everyone!